Good evening and welcome to this edition of Resource PNG. Being the country's major public policy research and policy think tank, the National Research Institute has always advocated for the development of sound economic and social policies that would improve the welfare of our people. In May this year, the NRI ran a symposium on taxation research and the review and broader economic policy research issues. As a follow-up to that symposium, we conducted a panel discussion with some of the senior researchers from NRI. This week, we present to you part one of that panel discussion.
Welcome to the show. Tonight we have with us from the National Research Institute, Dr. Osman Sanida and Dr. Francis Odongo. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you, Lynn.
Dr. Odongo, the government established a National Taxation Review Committee recently for the purposes of reforming the taxation system in PNG. What is the NRA's role in this, and how is the NRA contributing to this review?
Thank you. As you know, the tax review has been going on for quite some time now. They started in 2013, around September. Now, their main role was to look at the current situation where the taxation issues are at and how they are affecting individuals and businesses in the country. So they were to look at the issues that are not running well for people so that they can see where to change. Other areas that are good, I think they will just leave them as they are. Now, as NRI, we are basically a research institute. Now, for you or for the government to get a well-informed decision making, we had to do some research into the taxation issues affecting businesses and individuals, and then we see what is happening on the ground and where we are at. So we wanted to get the facts correct by doing some kind of research into all areas that are being reviewed so that we can give proper advice based on research.
Sure. NRA organized a symposium on tax research and review in May 2014. What were the main issues for the taxation review, and what is the role of the symposium in relation to this?
Yeah, as you know, as I've said, we were doing some research looking at the issues of taxation, and if you remember, the last review was done in 2000, the year 2000. Up to this time is now almost 14 years or 13 years. So a lot of issues have taken place. The bigger issues like the LNG project has been going on throughout this period. So we would expect changes to happen in almost all spheres, taxation included. So based on the research that we commissioned a number of international and local researchers to look at various areas of taxation. And they did this over a period of time, and we had now to call stakeholders to a symposium where the researchers were to present their work, the results of what they found. You know, when you do a research, you need to tell people what you have found and ask them for their views, what they think of your results. So that was the main purpose of the symposium, to make sure that all the stakeholders are invited to come and sort of validate the research findings. So that's what we were doing. Now, the main issues that came out from those research, I think they were to do with the multiplicity of taxes. What I mean is there are so many taxes involved in one situation. For example, one individual could be paying multiples of taxes, several taxes. You pay GST, you pay income tax, you pay customs. There are so many issues. And the other one was to do with the concessions given to others, and others don't have it. So this kind of biasness sort of in the taxation policy, the way it is treating businesses and individuals. The other one was to do with the burden, the tax burden. It happens that just a few or a small proportion of the population are bearing the burden of paying the taxes. And mostly it is falling on individual taxpayers, the people who pay personal income tax. And if you look at the employment situation, not so many people are employed. So that means a very small proportion of the population in PNG are paying taxes, and they are having a very huge burden. And others, like the companies, they got some concessions, so they have a lesser burden than others compared to or proportionate to the income they are earning. So those are I think the major issues that came up from the symposium.
Stay with us. We'll be back after these short messages. Thank you for staying with us. This week we are featuring part 1 of a panel discussion held with senior NRI researchers. We continue with this discussion.
Dr. Sanida, what do you mean by growing the economy, and what does the role of taxation, what is the role of taxation, or what is the impact of does taxation have on growing economy?
Thank you, William. Francis just mentioned about the symposium. One of the key themes in all the research projects that we commissioned on taxation was growing the economy. So what is the impact of these taxes on growing the economy? But let me start by just explaining what is meant by growing the economy, and then I will try to link the taxes to it. So in simple terms, growing the economy is basically, well, the word grow means to increase. An economy is the economy of PNG. So in terms of, so in an economy, there are four main players in the economy. You have the consumers, then you have the business sector who are producing the goods and services for consumption, and you also have the government. And the final one is the foreign sector. This involves those who produce to export, as well as those who import. So when we talk about the growing the economy, we're talking about increase in what is known as gross domestic product. So a gross domestic product is the value of final goods and services produced within an economy over a given period of time. So that's basically, so the economy has the supply side as well as the demand side. So supply side is where goods and services are produced, and on the demand side is where how the expenditure that is earned is spent. So to explain the growing the economy, let's look at what are the factors of production, or what things are needed to produce a particular good or service. Now, when production takes place, these are the key factors. The first one is capital. These are the plant and equipment that businesses use to produce a good or a service. But in production, you also need labor, and these are people who are employed to produce a particular good or a service. Then we have technology. So technology is basically the things that we use so that you can make labor more effective, or we can make capital more effective. The final factor production is the environment, or the institutional factors. How efficient they are also affects how capital, labor, and technology can be used. So growing the economy is basically to increase the amount of goods and services produced within an economy over a given period of time. And to do this, you need to increase these factors of production I just mentioned: capital, labor, technology, and the institutional factors. So that's from the supply side. But the production of goods and services like within the country does not happen in isolation. You must have a demand for it in order so that you produce to sell to a particular, and I've already mentioned the main the players, the consumers, the businesses who produce, and the government sector and the foreign sector. So there must be demand for a particular good or service. So like if, for instance, if we, the public, demand for a certain good, then the businesses will react by producing that. So both supply and demand work together. So that's in simple terms what is growing the economy. But to put it in a layman's term, think of it as like a cake. So you have let's say the cake is the current economy, what production of goods, the amount of goods and services or the income that is earned from those. So growing the economy is about increasing the size of the cake. So if you increase the size of the cake, you're able to share the cake with more people than if the cake is small. So that's why growing the economy is important, to increase the amount of goods and services as well as incomes, and to improve welfare. So that's growing the economy. But I also want to touch, because in terms of its relationship with taxes, right? So I've mentioned the supply side as well as the demand side, the different. So each of them are affected by taxes. For instance, capital. In order for businesses to employ capital, it's affected by different, the GST, the level of corporate tax also affects the decisions on how much to employ capital to produce. In terms of labor, it's affected by taxes. Businesses will also be affected by the decisions on that, and consumers. The people who want to put themselves on the market can also be affected by the amount of tax. So that's from supply side, and technology also affected the various taxes that are imposed. From the demand side, taxes also affect the different people that I have just mentioned. For instance, from consumption, our demand is also affected by our disposable income, which is what is left after we have paid tax, right? If you pay more tax, it means that you have less to spend, and therefore your demand for good or service will be lower. So ideally, you would want to pay less tax so that you can have a higher income to spend. And if you have a higher income to spend, then businesses will respond by producing more. So growing the economy is important for increasing the goods and services for people as well as incomes, and also for general welfare, like for government must put in place certain measures that will grow the economy, and tax, the type of tax we impose must be such that we encourage more investment by business and encourage individuals. All those the factors of production I mentioned, that it will help them, give them incentives to be able to produce more goods and services for welfare enhancement.
Resource PNG will be back after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. This Taxation Research and Review Symposium is a direct response to the Government of PNG Reform Initiative to put in place appropriate reforms in order to realign the tax system to support the country's present medium and long-term economic and social development objectives. In the final segment of this week's Part 1 episode on taxation, we'll look at the rationale and impacts of taxes paid by the resources sector.
Dr. Sanita, once again, what are the rationale and impacts of the resource taxes, example, corporate, mining and petroleum taxes? What are your views on this issue?
Okay, so we have mentioned, Francis in his introductory remarks has mentioned different types of taxes. And one of the taxes that is imposed on companies in the resources sector, and corporate tax, basically. Now, so as we have mentioned, the main objective of tax is for the government to earn revenue to spend on social and economic programs that will enhance welfare. This particular tax, corporate tax, if you look at, let's look at it specifically in terms of the PNG. You can see it from two rationale. First, taking it from the government perspective. A government needs the money to spend, and tax is the avenue. And resource tax, if we look at it, let's look at it at the production. The economy is dominated by resource extraction. I talked about the GDP. The resource sector dominates the production of goods and services. Sure. And so the rationale for taxation in this sector is to get more taxation income to be used. The other point thing that needs to be pointed out is the issue of ownership of resource. Well, as we know that the law currently says that anything below 6 feet is owned by the government. However, the government is for the people. Therefore, they own the resource. So the question is, how can we maximize benefit from the resources that we own? And tax is one way to get a return for using our resource. So that's basically. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Odongo. Currently, the government has an option to take up 30% of equity shares in mineral and petroleum companies. What implications does this have for the country's economy?
My colleague here has just mentioned the issue of ownership of resources. Now, take for example, when an investor wants to come and put up a business in the resource sector, there are issues involved because the resources are in a particular area, in a land which belongs to some other people, the indigenous owners. But now the government says they own, the level below 6 feet is for the government, but the government is by the people. So it's owned by the people effectively. Now, the resources that the company wants to extract, it's supposed to be making money. They're in business. When they make enough good money, they're supposed to make profits. And from the profits, supposed to come taxation, which is going to the government. Now, you find that the arrangement currently in PNG is such that government has shares, is a shareholder in these resource companies. And at the same time, government is a regulator, supposed to be providing a conducive business environment for doing business. The question somebody can ask is, if many investors are coming in the same sector, is the government going to be owning shares in each and every company that comes on board? It looks a little bit tricky, because for one company, yes, like it happened with the monopoly companies like telecom many years ago, PNG Power, government was like the only shareholder. But now in the private sector business, where people have their money they want to invest, but when they come here, you tell them, for you to invest, I have to have a share in your business. So how many companies is the government going to be a partner in? And suppose it happens that the government already has shares in certain companies. The ones coming in the future, if the government doesn't take up the shares in those companies, what will be the implication? Sort of some biasness will come in, because they will be tend to favor the ones that they are owning and leave the others aside. In another case is where maybe they might feel a little bit rigid in giving licenses for competitors, because government is already a shareholder in one of the existing companies. So that means they will be limiting competition. Yet government should be opening up the level playing field for competition in business. So by government owning shares in certain companies and not in all of them, then that creates some issue about competition and fairness. The other question is, the landowners, in most cases, they get compensation when the resource companies go to their villages. It would have been good for the landowners to own the shares directly, not the government owning on behalf of the people. Because if, for example, we are looking at the benefits, I think arguments have been said that government gets dividends out of the business income where they own shares. But then that dividend goes to the pool where the budget is supposed to be made. That is subject to budget again. The government can decide when to distribute or how to distribute that money which has been received from taxation of the company or from dividends. If the dividend was going directly to the people would decide what to do with it, not the government to decide when to give it out or how to distribute it. So it's like government is competing with the people. Instead of, I think the best scenario would have been where the government is promoting individuals to own shares in those companies. They may not be individuals like you and me, but we could be members of a landowner company. Then the landowner company, when we receive compensation, we should use that money to buy the shares in that company, instead of looking for other sources, government to buy shares or government to wait for dividends. I think currently there's an issue going on of reviewing the Capital Markets Act, trying to promote shares trading in the stock exchange. Hopefully some of these big companies will be listed in the Port Moresby Stock Exchange, and one of the key things is to see how are the local people, the individuals, the local mom and dads, whether they will be able to buy shares in these companies, either directly or through their landowner companies. Now the question is the government also going to be buying shares in such companies? Because if a resource company is listed on the stock exchange and is offering shares for sale, individuals will be there to buy. What about government? Because he has been a shareholder before. Now, if the government buys, then it means it's going to limit the amount or the number of shares that the other individuals will be getting. So it would have been good for government just to be the referee, provide the level playing field for everyone to do business, but not to compete with them. I think that's the issue that should be looked at.
Well, that's all we have for you tonight on Resource PNG. If you want to know more about the program, do email us on this address. That's resourcepng@emtv.com.pg, or check MTV online. That's www.emtv.com.pg, and go to our Resource PNG page. You can also check out our page on Facebook. Until the same time next week, have a pleasant evening. Goodbye.